individuals. It helped them get off of the opioid that was threatening their very lives. And what we know today, a couple of important things, and you're going to hear from the experts to talk about it, is that there is no known dose of metrogenine or kratom that would cause a death. Critics have too long exploited the misinformation. Some of those critics are sitting in this room, and they are wrong. They perpetuate this myth about kratom. They say the kratom is dangerous, and yet the important thing about the NIH announcement yesterday was that they are going to do an investigational new drug application process that will take 2 to 3 years, and they will examine whether or not they can then move to a new drug application to allow for purified metrogenine to be a solution for the opioid crisis. But the important takeaway from what was announced yesterday was a simple thing. They cannot, they being NIH, cannot, and the FDA cannot, undertake a human study without first verifying to an independent institutional review board that kratom is safe, that they cannot put the human subjects at an unreasonable risk. And that's what we're here today to discuss. We want to talk about how inside this building, patriots have gathered in order to tell you, and you saw some of them in your offices yesterday. You have heard from, every office has heard from many kratom advocates across the country pleading for the U.S. Congress to do one simple thing, and that is to regulate kratom through the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. We don't want the products that threaten the safety of the American people to be on the market today. We don't want the imposters who claim that their products are kratom when they're not. We don't want a chemically manipulated drug that is an opioid masquerading as kratom to be allowed to be sold. And we know that the FDA, as a part of their journey in understanding the pure leaf kratom itself, announced on July 29th of last year that they were recommending to the DEA to schedule kratom, Schedule 7-OH as a Schedule I substance. The DEA is evaluating that. We hope that they will move quickly. But in the interim, what we know is true is that these manufacturers will play all sorts of games with the product formulations. And as soon as they get banned with one, then they're going to leap to another, and they'll just tweak one molecule or another. And that's why the U.S. Congress has got to act in order to set strict standards that say that you cannot sell a kratom product, a natural kratom leaf product, and masquerade as a synthetic, calling it kratom. And we want the restrictions to ban the sale of those 7-OH products. And I'll conclude this part of the presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to some important people. I'll tell you that while we are for regulation, we understand that there are many people, consumers, who were misled by the 7-OH industry. When it first came onto the market in 2021, big market splash in mid-2023, they thought they were taking kratom. And they ended up with an opioid that addicted them just as surely as fentanyl and morphine and heroin. And they today are addicted. And they cry out and they say, oh, don't take 7-OH away from me. Well, we do not allow in this country for someone to buy a product in a retail establishment that is an opioid. We don't allow you to go down to the street corner and buy meth and heroin and fentanyl because it's not regulated or controlled. And we're asking the U.S. Congress to step in and take appropriate action in order to control that. So I mentioned to you earlier that we, in 2016, in the kratom community, fought back against the then FDA recommendation that was founded on improper science as identified by the Assistant Secretary for Health. One of those patriots, one of those champions of kratom, one of those who had experience is my good friend Andrew Turner. He was one of that small band of patriots that stood outside the White House and this Capitol building and pled for the Congress to act responsibly, for the FDA to recognize the truth about natural leaf kratom. And I'm going to turn the time over to him. His journey continues to be one that is fascinating. Yesterday, as he was coming down for the Hill Day, he was mugged at a metro stop here in Washington, D.C. So he missed the day yesterday. But we're glad he's here. We're glad he's in good health. He is, and I made the mistake of talking to John Chinholt, who's here, and I called him a former Marine, and he corrected me. He said, no, a Marine is always a Marine. And I think what the thugs found in Andrew Turner is a veteran that is a soldier and a warrior and a champion. So Andrew, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name's Andrew Turner. I am a Navy veteran, an advocate, a longtime advocate for Kratom, someone who spent years working with veterans, their families, and individuals while also trying to navigate my own chronic pain, neurological conditions due to burn pit exposure, PTSD, and the complicated realities of long-term health care. I stand before you today in support of keeping Kratom legal, regulated, and accessible to responsible adults. In 2012, I was retired from the Navy due to combat-related injuries, multiple deployments overseas, dealing with both physical and mental disabilities. But in 2013, I developed a rare movement disorder called Mage syndrome. It causes muscle spasms in my face and neck, and there's really no known cure or even really a good treatment cycle for it. At one point, I was taking about 25 different prescription medications. I was pretty much a zombie at the time. I lived here in DC, was treated at the DC VA, but most of my days were spent sitting on my couch, not really understanding where I was at, because I was pretty much on everything they could prescribe me. But my doctor at the time realized that there was problems going on in my head, obviously with my PTSD, and related to the neurological disorder, and they were starting to worry about something that many veterans face, suicide. So my doctor decided it might be a wise idea to start reducing the pharmaceutical options that were there, the things that really weren't working for me at the time. And he started mentioning maybe looking at something a little more natural. Wasn't Kratom, it was just whatever we could find. We were trying to find different things. I've tried CBD at the time. It was a little harder to get than it is today. It tried pretty much every botanical we could. And the funny part is I kept reading these stories online back then. This was back around 2014 about this plant called Kratom. I had no idea what it was. It sounded like snake oil to me. You know, I would hear these stories. I just couldn't believe that that was possible for folks dealing with pain, dealing with mental and physical injuries. But at that point, I said, you know, I didn't have a whole lot to lose. My doctor said he'd be willing to oversee my consumption. He couldn't prescribe it. Obviously, this wasn't something that the VA gives out. But he was able to actually oversee that use. We got whatever studies we could get, kind of read through them. He didn't feel there was any major risk at that point, but again, he was going to pretty heavily oversee that, and we'd even started a case study at the time, but it was a case study that was never able to be completed. Strangely, though, I got Kratom the first time, and it didn't work. The product I got didn't help. Maybe it was a defective product, maybe it was old. Not real clear, but the doctor said, you know, it sounds like this might help, but maybe you need to get a more purified form or a raw form versus what I was getting at the time. So we tried one more time, and within about a week, the spasms in my face and neck had started to go away. Even having a conversation like this at that time, I wouldn't have been able to do. It would seize my vocal cords, the spasms would be so bad in my neck. But it kind of reduced that. Now, are the spasms gone? No. Am I in pain most days? Absolutely. I've got problems with my back and my neck due to injuries from deployment to Iraq. My hand was shattered on one deployment. I've had multiple surgeries on that. You know, Kratom is not some miracle cure, but it is something that actually helps me get through the day. It makes it a little bit easier for me. And for me, this issue is deeply personal, but it's also much larger than any one individual story. Across this country, there are veterans, there are chronic pain patients, there are recovering addicts, working class Americans, and everyday people who feel like they've run out of options. Many of them are searching for ways to improve their quality of life while avoiding dependence on powerful pharmaceuticals that often come with serious side effects and long-term consequences. For years, we've watched our country struggle through an opioid epidemic that's devastated families and communities. We've seen what happens when people become dependent on medications that were originally marketed as safe and manageable. We've also saw what happens when policy decisions are made without fully listening to the people most affected by them. That is why conversations about Kratom matter. Now let me be clear, I'm not here to argue that Kratom is perfect. I'm not here to say it should exist without oversight or accountability. In fact, I strongly support responsible regulation and have for over 10 years. sport product testing, labeling requirements, age restrictions, consumer protections, and manufacturing standards that keep dangerous contaminants out of the marketplace. History has shown us repeatedly that outright bans rarely solve complex public health issues. More often, they create black markets, drive products underground, remove opportunities for safety standards, and make consumers even more vulnerable. If kratom is ever banned, the people who rely on it will not simply disappear. Many will turn to unsafe alternatives. Some may return to prescription opioids. Others may seek products from unregulated underground markets where there are no standards, no transparency, and no protections whatsoever. That's not harm reduction. That is not public safety. We should be encouraging research, scientific study, transparency, and evidence-based policy. We should be asking difficult questions and demanding honest answers. But we should also be willing to listen to the thousands of Americans who consistently say that kratom has played a positive role in their lives. Too often, the conversation about kratom has been driven by fear, sensational headlines, and incomplete information. We've all heard stories where kratom is blamed in situations involving multiple substances or complicated medical circumstances, while the full context gets buried beneath attention-grabbing narratives. Public policy should not be built on panic. It should be built on facts. As a veteran, this issue carries additional meaning for me. Veterans often live with chronic pain, service-related injuries, PTSD, anxiety, sleep disorders, and other long-term health challenges. Many veterans know what it feels like to be handed prescription after prescription while still searching for something that helps them function, work, sleep, and live a meaningful life. Veterans like myself deserve to have our voices heard. Adults deserve the freedom to make informed decisions about their own bodies and their own health. That freedom should come with responsibility, education, and regulation, but it should not be taken away because of misinformation or political pressure. And beyond the policy arguments, we also need compassion. When people talk about kratom, they are often talking about human beings who are trying to hold their lives together. They're parents trying to go to work without chronic pain. They're veterans trying to cope with invisible wounds. They are people in recovery trying to avoid returning to substances that nearly destroyed their lives. They are Americans who simply want the chance to live with dignity and stability. Those people matter. Their stories matter. Their experiences deserve more than dismissal or ridicule. I believe we can have a balanced approach. We can support science while protecting consumer access. We can encourage regulation without criminalization. We can prioritize public safety without stripping away personal freedom. But to do that, we have to stop treating this issue as a political talking point and start treating it as a public health conversation grounded in honesty, research, and humanity. At the end of the day, keeping kratom legal is not about promoting a miracle solution. It's about preserving choice, supporting harm reduction, encouraging responsible regulation, and recognizing that people deserve options when it comes to their own health and well-being. I will continue speaking out because I believe people deserve to be heard. Veterans deserve better solutions, and public policy should be based on evidence, not fear. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Andrew. And you'll have the opportunity to talk with Andrew afterwards. There's a question and answer period we'll have as well if you have any specific questions, but a warrior. And we're grateful for him being here today. One of my responsibilities at the American Kratom Association is to try to find resources and people that can help in moving the message forward. And I had the great opportunity of having a conversation with Dr. Rahul Gupta, who was formerly the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy in the White House. It was a difficult conversation because I'm a Republican, and he was in the Biden White House. But the one thing that shone through to me as this Republican is that this was a person who was seeking the truth. This was an individual who understood the crisis that we're immersed in the United States today, people that are trying to find relief in pain management and finding the opioids and the threats and the risks and the deaths that follow. And his interest in learning more about kratom was terrific. And we're honored to have him here today as our moderator for this panel discussion. So I'll introduce Dr. Gupta to you in order to continue this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. And for every one of you that is not in the VIP seat, Mac has promised to get you a box of dots. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. At this center, this is important, and I want to thank Mac and the AKA for organizing it. I want to thank our congressional staff, obviously our guests that are here, and I'll introduce the experts in a little bit, but Dr. Henningfield, we heard from Andrew Turner, Dr. Sikora. It's very important. And to those who are using Kratom, as well as who are addiction pharmacology and public health experts that are joining us today, I think it's really important to bring that expertise to this subject that is often discussed with more heat than light. My goal as the outset is to frame the urgency of this conversation and to do so with the balance that this issue deserves. Kratom should not be discussed only through the lens of fear, nor only through the lens of promise. It should be discussed through science, through public health, through consumer safety, and the urgent need for new tools to address addiction. And I'll try to make a case for you why. You know, for more than almost 3 decades now, the United States has lived through a wave after wave of the addiction and opioid crisis. I saw this beginning of this crisis not only as an abstraction, but someone on the ground practicing primary care medicine, caring for patients across rural America. I saw families, I saw communities, health systems that struggled as the prescription opioid wave accelerated in the early 2000s, driven in large part by pills like OxyContin and so much more potent opioid prescribing. And I've continued to see in clinical practice and in public service how this crisis has evolved rather than disappeared. I've attended far too many funerals of folks that I can only describe as deaths that did not need to happen. Every one of these deaths to me, is not a statistic. Somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's a school teacher, others that the community is left often with grief in my home state of West Virginia especially. Now, as the country has responded to the wave of this prescription opioids, the supply has increasingly shifted to the street, and this is important. First through heroin, then through illicitly manufactured fentanyl, a much more potent synthetic opioid that you know that drove exponential rise in overdose deaths. More recently, we've seen a fourth wave, a wave of polysubstance use. Fentanyl mixed with stimulants, with benzos, cocaine, xylazine, or tranq as we call it, and others. Now let me tell you, I've been doing this analysis for a long time. And I'm here to tell you what nobody will tell you right now if you looked up the literature. That we are facing what may become a fifth and a deeply concerning wave of the epidemic. This is the movement of synthetic and semi-synthetic drug threats from the street onto commercial retail spaces. This has never happened before. We're looking at convenience stores, smoke shops, online platforms, and other settings where products can appear ordinary. They can often be mislabeled. And the pharmacology of these compounds is anything but ordinary. This is why precision matters. This is why we need to distinguish the kratom leaf and its derivatives from concentrated, chemically altered, or what we call 7-OH, or 7-hydroxymetrogenine products. Products that carry a very different risk profile. So the 7-OH exists at low levels in natural kratom leaf. But products that are concentrated, enhanced, synthesized, often getting their source from China, and marketed around the country should not be casually treated as the same thing as the traditional kratom leaf. Now, conflating those categories is not good science, and it's not good policy. That distinction is the one I've emphasized. I've sent letters to governors and policymakers around the country, including in states that are thinking about how to regulate kratom. I think the simplistic goal in government, like a binary goal, like ban everything or regulate nothing, is not going to work here. The goal should be to separate the botanical kratom and its potential therapeutic promise from synthetic and highly concentrated products that may disproportionately contribute to bad outcomes. Now, we got to be honest about where the science is. As Mac mentioned, FDA has often viewed kratom through the food and dietary supplement framework, and FDA continues to warn about the risks. But the scientific story is way broader than that. It is broader than what the FDA is saying. We now have federally supported human dosing work on botanical kratom, suggesting the tolerability under controlled conditions, and we have the major development from the NIH. The announcement that an investigational new drug, or IND, or ability to go into phase 1 human trials, as it is, for metragynine, is in effect, clearing the way for an NIH-led phase 1 human safety study of metragynine as a potential treatment for opioid use disorder. Now, this is a big deal. It's a huge deal, and we need to understand this. Because at this significant moment, NIDA, NIH, and I work with NIDA very closely, and CATS and academic partners are not saying that we got all the answers. They're not saying that. What they are saying is that the question is important enough that need to research. And early science is promising enough at this point to study it carefully in humans. And this is exactly the posture we want from our federal partners. Not stigma, not hype, but rigorous evaluation. And the need could not be more urgent, let me tell you why. If you look at SAMHSA data, tens of millions, about 50 million Americans suffer from substance use disorder. 8 million of them are opioid use disorder. Yet only a fraction of people actually get the treatment that they need for a bunch of reasons, and we heard from Andrew some of those reasons. Now, at the same time, we're seeing a lot of progress. I mean, we've seen public health infrastructure really get to work. We've seen expansion in treatment. We've got naloxone that is now available over the counter. And for the first time in the history of the United States, we have seen over 30% declines in overdose deaths. And I'm happy to take the credit for it, Mac. But again, the drug supply is going to keep evolving. That's a sure shot. And that's why we can't afford to shut the door on new and novel tools of science to help people treat addiction. So today's conversation really should be about science. It should be about standards. It should be about public health. How do we protect consumers? How do we prevent bad actors from exploiting gaps in regulation? How do we ensure accurate labeling, age restrictions, testing, adverse event monitoring? How do we support research into compounds that may have significant therapeutic potential? And how do we do all of this while keeping our focus on the millions of Americans that are living with opioid use disorder and other substance use disorders? Because opioid use disorder may just be the start. It's certainly not going to be the end, because we know the kind of folks that are using it is just beyond opioid use disorder. So I do welcome the NIH's announcement. I welcome the openness to careful research and development. I think it's a big deal. And I do welcome also the chance from experts to hear about what we're doing. So let me, with that, introduce one of the experts, but someone who's a major force to reckon with across the country, Dr. Jack Hennenfield. As you know, Jack began his research in neuropharmacology since 1971. And he's been a faculty at Hopkins. He's worked with NIDA. He's someone that's relied upon by NIH, NIDA, and the majority of experts across the country, who works with the Penny Associates. Again, he often reminds me of his work with Surgeon General C. Everett Koop and what a mentor he was to Jack, and Jack's been to so many others. So with all that, welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Turner, thank you for your service. A lot of my work at NIDA was working with Veterans Administration, Department of Defense on medicines, and really came to appreciate what you folks go through to protect us. By the way, my wife and I saw the D-Day movie Pressure over the weekend, and everybody should see it. It's a real eye-opener, but also it's a triumph of science. So as a scientist, I loved it. And scientists willing to speak truth to power. You mentioned Dr. Koop. Both Mac and I served Dr. Koop in the early 80s. His mantra was, it's easy to get the disease and hard to get treatment. And he applied that to many things, but especially addictions. And he was a leader in harm reduction when harm reduction really had a bad name. And he said, we have to do what, make it easier for people to save their lives and prevent disease, whether it was HIV, AIDS, or addiction. Can you put the first slide up? Let's see, am I controlling slides or somebody flipping slides for me? Okay, next slide. My disclosure, through Pinney Associates, I consult on regulation, development of medicines, on kratom. I've served as a witness in kratom affairs and testified in a federal court hearing where the FDA was also invited to testify, and they said they didn't need to testify because they had not yet determined if kratom was hazardous. That was interesting. But anyway, I consult in this area through Pinney Associates. Overview slide, please. I want to start out with my overview because it's also my conclusions, and I want to make sure that these points don't get lost. And then what I'm going to do is show you the science that backs these points. First, kratom is a natural botanical product. At this point, the federal survey suggests it might be only 2 to 3 million people. Everybody agrees, including I think my federal friends, that that survey uses a panel that is substantially underestimating the number of kratom consumers, which is probably more than 20 million in the most recently nationally representative survey suggested 24 million adults. It provides a mixture of effects, and this is something that I work in chronic pain, and part of the trick with chronic pain is helping people find emotional and physical functionality, and with just an opioid, you're often anesthetized and not very functional. Kratom has a combination of effects that seem to work better for some people. 7-OH that naturally occurs is at what FDA considers small levels that have little impact biologically, and that's important to keep in mind. Now people say, yes, but your body produces 7-OH in the body, and it does, and that naturally occurring 7-OH in the body we've now known for more than 10 years of mainly NIDA-supported research, my old institute, I'm proud of NIDA, that is not hurting people. And FDA's most recent safety study tracked 7-OH. And you could look that up. It's RISIG, REISSIG 2026 for more information that I can give you. Over the past 5 to 10 years, kratom products are increasingly spiked with 7-OH. Mac may remember close to 10 years ago, I was at an American Kratom Association conference that maybe some of you were here that are vendors. And I said, some vendors are making 10 times 7-OH and mitragynine. And I said, don't do that. Those of us that are doing the science, we have concerns about 7-OH. It's a problem. We don't have enough science to say it should be banned, but we have enough science to say, this is serious. Take it seriously. Most adverse event reporting systems, I'm saying most, meaning because basically all until recently, anybody that called in and said, I was using kratom and I have this, or this, it didn't matter if it was kratom or 7-OH. In a lot of cases, they didn't know they were getting 7-OH. And if they said 7-OH, it was counted as kratom. So why are adverse events going up? Well, partly because there's millions more people using, but also because a lot of those are 7-OH. problems. Kratom does not meet the statutory criteria or the pharmacology criteria as an opioid. We can talk about that later. The Controlled Substances Act has a definition. Kratom doesn't meet it. Mitragynine doesn't meet it. 7-OH by 2025 met it. It passed over the line in terms of the science, and FDA made the announcement, and I agree with them. My own 7-OH 8-factor analysis is online. Just look it up and you can get a lot more detail on that. And going to a point that Andrew reminded us of, what happens when you just take something off the market? Well, in our analysis, we have a section 9 in our 8-factor analysis that gets to the policy implications. And we said, if 7-OH is put in Schedule 1 and banned, that means it'll immediately be illegal to sell it. That means a black market will emerge, and that means some people for whom 7-OH was their lifeline away from opioid will be at risk. So our analysis says, if you ban it, do it with a flexible enforcement policy. Don't come down on the consumers. They may need time and assistance to transition to medicines or other products. You got to recognize that. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through these really quickly. The 3 agencies are involved in drug scheduling. NIDA, My Old Institute, and FDA takes the lead. NIDA provides the science. NIDA got its formal role in 1985, and I was the head of the first section at NIDA that had that role, so my job was work with FDA and DEA on scheduling, and I've been doing that ever since. That's what I do at Kinney Associates. But DEA schedules. If it's a new drug, they got to schedule within 90 days of approval. For things like marijuana and kratom, or 7-OH rather, there's no timeline. So we need encouragement of DEA to move on 7-OH. They've had the request since last July. Scheduling is based on 8 factors of the Controlled Substances Act. It's a data-driven process. It gets into the what. What's the pharmacology? What's the toxicology? The who. Who is using it? Who will be affected? What are the benefits? What are the risks? Is scheduling the best tool? One of my first scheduling challenges at NIDA was nicotine gum. Met all criteria for scheduling. We all agreed that it didn't make any sense to schedule it, so it wasn't. Kratom does not meet the criteria, and kratom has never been listed in DEA's annual National Drug Threat Reports. Never. 7-OH, I suspect, will be in the report next year. Next slide. Look at recent science. A lot of people say, well, if we've got science, it's AKA science or industry science. The vast majority of the science, next slide please, is philanthropy science, mainly NIDA science. And this is what I call the NIDA effect. NIDA got into the game. It had been funding some research back 15 years ago that was important, but it really got into the game in 2016. And we have got a mountain of evidence. Dan Wang, could you stand up? He's one of my colleagues at Kinney Associates. Amongst other things, he manages collecting the library that we provide to American Kratom Association, which now has, close to 1,200 science articles. So when people say, we don't know much about kratom, we know a lot about kratom. Why is NIDA launching a clinical study of mitragynine? It's not because they're just shooting darts, it's because their own data show that a lot of people are using kratom to get off of opioids. So they're going to take it a step further and see if we can do a clinical trial. Next slide, please. Who are the kratom consumers? Actually, if I took a picture of this room, it looks like the people in this room. It's a cross-section of America, and we know that now from many surveys. Why do people use it? Pain, stress, in place of caffeine as a morning pick-me-up. Next slide, please. So we've got a mountain of research. Part of what NIDA did was pump a lot of research in the University of Florida, which now has an amazing research machine which is working with DEA, FDA, doing studies, including the FDA's study that Mac mentioned, was a collaboration with University of Florida and others, and run by one of the contract research organizations that we work with. And by the way, the kratom they used was imported from Indonesia. I think it was Super Speciosa Organics. I mean, it's a commercial company, and they use that kratom in their study. So if somebody says it's illegal, well, no, FDA bought it legally off the market. It's legal product. And they gave it to doses about 3 times higher than the average person takes. And they measured 7-hydroxy and found, okay, this is safe enough to go on to the next studies and maybe push the dose even higher. Next slide, please. Back more than a dozen years ago, and this was NIDA-supported research too, trying to pick apart the kratom plant and its alkaloids. What's going on? Why does it have some opioid effects, but it doesn't kill animals? And respiratory depression has been looked at 5 different species of animals at very high doses. Well, we learned that it's kind of like a train going into the station, and one goes directly to the respiratory depressant system. The other is gated, goes to another pathway, and can relieve pain without the respiratory effects. It's not magic, it's not made up. It's hard science, it's neuropharmacology. Next slide, please. Kratom is like coffee. Coffee has 40 or 50 alkaloids, and tea and chocolate. They all have some caffeine, but they all have a lot of other things that make them different. Kratom, too, a lot of natural plants. It's not just single entities. They've got lots of stuff. And again, we've got a lot of science on those different alkaloids and metabolites. Next slide. I love Chris McCurdy. He runs the University of Florida program, and he talks about kratom as a symphony. And that's part of the reason that a lot of people like natural products, because a lot of the natural products are symphonies. They have a number of things. And so I think there's a place for distilled products. Pure mitragynine will help some people. They're already on the market. But other people need the symphony. Next slide. One of the really cool studies done at Hopkins, led by Kirsten Smith, one of my mentees, with NIDA funding, was having people track their behavior and their mood, feelings, and when they're using kratom throughout the day. And this is what FDA recommends for clinical trials these days for medicines. And part of what they're looking at, you see the red dots at the top? Is kratom more helpful or harmful? And on many different measures, hindrance to daily living, help or hindrance, it was coming out for the most people a help. Now, as Mr. Turner discussed, he wasn't very active when he was medicated on a lot of things. Some people need a lot of medications. But if we can help people and help them be functional, you might look up an article I did with others 2022 on using psychedelics for chronic pain. That's being explored at Hopkins because for some people it helps achieve the emotional acceptance of some pain to get their lives back. Next slide, please. So what's 7-OH? You already know a lot about 7-OH, so let's move to the next slide. This was a study that got a lot of us very concerned. Guess what? If you're testing drugs for addictiveness, rats pressing levers to get the drug given intravenously is the single most powerful, accurate predictor we have. And again, you can look at Google my name 2025, and there's a recent article on this. Rats beat humans. So here's morphine. The rats press a lever lots of times to get morphine. Here's mitragynine at a wide range of doses. The rats don't like mitragynine. Here's 7-hydroxy. The bigger the dose, the more they like it, and at a certain dose, even for rats, that's too much. Those are super high doses, but it was part of the reason me and others 10 years ago said, Mac, push for legislation to put a cap on 7-OH. If it's at de minimis levels, below 2%, it's probably not a problem. Don't let people push it up. That's a problem. Next slide. What about respiratory depression? Here's the top one is morphine, and you see those purple bars, that's the rats getting morphine and respiration drops. The way it's graphed, it doesn't look big, but that's a big drop. Here's mitragynine, or here's mitragynine on the bottom. It's flat. It actually increases respiration a little bit. But here's 7-hydroxy. Bigger the dose, the bigger the drop. And that was one of the last straws. That was helped solidify, okay, 7-hydroxy does have a sufficient morphine-like profile to call it an opioid by law and schedule it. Next slide. I did with support, I went to MAC and I said, if you can get sponsors to support an FDA model respiratory depression study in mitragynine, I'd like to do that because we'd use their model. And by their model, we went up to use oxycodone at the doses FDA recommended, and we get Death Valley plummeting in respiratory gas, oxygen. We went up to 400 milligrams per kilogram in hemotic dose equivalent. Some of you that know kratom will know that 65 milligrams per kilogram, what's a technical term? It's a boatload. About 100 times more than most people use. No effect on respiration. Next slide. So, what did FDA say? And I'm going to wrap up with comments from FDA July 25th. They did their own scientific analysis, kind of a mini 8-factor. And Reisig et al., he led it at the controlled substances staff. Critically, 7-OH produces respiratory depression, physical dependence, withdrawal, symptoms characteristic of classic opioids. He said, whether overall abuse potential is most accurately characterized as lower, higher, or similar to morphine, it doesn't really matter. It's sufficiently similar. So when the secretary goes a little off and says it's the next fentanyl, we don't have evidence saying it's fentanyl. But it's close enough to morphine to warrant scheduling. And you don't have to be fentanyl to warrant scheduling. The FDA commissioner pointed out it's more potent than morphine. We need regulation and education. And my 8-factor analysis, which is about 10 times longer than theirs, and if you get it, it also includes their own documents in the appendix, and it's online, has all the science. Next slide. And importantly, they made a clear line in the sand between kratom and 7-OH. They sent out what we used to call Dear Doctors letters. Now it's called Dear Colleagues letters. And the Dear Colleagues letter is very clear, warning about 7-OH and saying our focus is not kratom. Next slide. So FDA recommended scheduling formally. NIDA had input into it last July. I think it is for better and for worse. DEA is taking their time. It is complicated. DEA understands that there are some people using it to stay off of opioids. So they need some pressure probably to move more quickly. Thank you.
So one of the questions that we get asked all the time is why, and I get the 7-OH people telling me this, why is it that you advocate for prohibition, a ban, if you think this is, the same principle that Jack in part discussed? And the reason is the safety profile. That's where it has to end. And Jack discussed his 8-factor analysis, which is the criteria embedded in the Controlled Substances Act for the scheduling of controlled substances. And the 7-OH manufactured synthetic, chemically manipulated products meet the 8 factors. And that's why the FDA made the recommendation. It's why we support it today, because we don't want consumers exposed to unsafe products. So I'm going to run through very quickly some of the products that are on the market today that you can then view after this meeting is concluded on the easels along here. But as an example, the first one we have is an EDP shot, it's called. And it has, remember the standard, in natural kratom leaf products, trace amounts of 7-OH do exist because of the catalyzing drying process of the leaves. It never is at an unsafe level. It is trace amounts in many cases less than 0.03%, sometimes completely undetectable. There are occasions when you ingest kratom, your body metabolizes kratom into 7-OH, again at low levels. It is not what you see in commercially available products on the market today. This EDB shot has 6.65 milligrams of the 7-OH product in it. In fact, if you look at the results, I'm sorry, I need to correct something. 7-OH, the next step, chemically manipulated, is pseudodoxil. The next step beyond that is 8-OH, 10-OH, and then they keep tweaking it. And then you have MGM 15 and 16, all dangerous, more dangerous as they escalate. This product has 6.65 milligrams of pseudodoxil. It is a high concentration opioid, extremely dangerous. This product has 0.40, I need to see, actually say, I can't see the one in the back. 0.4, that's my old age coming. Jack and I, he mentioned we were in the Reagan administration era with Chick Coop, and that was back in the 1980s. Dates us, eyesight failures too. This is 0.40 milligrams of the dangerous levels of this 7-OH products. They simply have to. You can find these products at retail establishments around the country. The next one is the, I know we have to speak in the microphone, by the way, because Jack was straying. Jack and his wife are ballroom dancers, and he was dancing up here, but we were live streaming this, so we need to stand close to the mic. But here we have 90.37% of pseudodoxil. It's nuts. It's on the market today. And the 7-OH manufacturers want to say, oh, don't blame us. It's just the same thing. It's the same as kratom. That is a lie. And they're telling you that, and they're trying to justify it. When they come into your offices, you need to tell them that it's not true. Make them prove it. Next one is 9.94% of milligram, and then they have 0.55% of pseudodoxil. Dangerous level. The others are really beyond belief. So you go through one product after another. All of these will be on, as I say, on these easels as you go forward. But you can see these products were tested in labs to determine what the levels are. If you look on the labels, that's not what it says on the label. They are misleading consumers every day. And I'm just going to whip through these and let people see them afterwards. These products are dangerous. They're out there. It is why we advocate for the banning of these products, because of the irresponsible manufacturing processes of these people. When 7-OH first came on the market, one of the leading manufacturers was asked the question, how do you do this? And he said, oh, and he was trying to normalize it. He said, everybody's familiar with how you shock your backyard pool. We make 7-OH by taking high concentration chlorine with baking soda, and we catalyze it. And that's normal? And you're ingesting the chemicals you use to shock your backyard pool? I think not. That's the problem we run into over and over and over again with these kinds of products. When that same manufacturer was asked by a distributor, what should I do when the FDA announced that they were going to recommend scheduling to the DEA? And the distributor said to this manufacturer, tell me right now, what should I do? And the answer back was, this is the greatest advertising that we could have. Keep selling it. After the FDA said that it was dangerous, greatest advertising you could have. I'm sorry, do you have a question? So the answer to that is direct. The natural plant is what it is. All of the, there are more than 50 alkaloids. Never, ever, ever will it get above 0.3% in natural trace amounts. So when we establish the 2% level of the overall fraction of the alkaloids in the plant as the standard, and that's what you see in many states where we passed Kratom Consumer Protection Act, it goes to your question. That's the naturally occurring levels. You can get that in a natural kratom leaf product. What you have with 7-OH is a chemically manipulated concoction, and it should go through the regulatory process for approval, which you've just suggested. The way to do that is through the FDA. You don't get to play the game of saying, this is under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, this is a natural product. It is not. It is a chemically manipulated product, and that's the difference as we go forward here.
Can I comment too? I think to answer your question also, if you just talk about mitragynine, can we have it? Well, you could always make bigger capsules, okay, that nothing stops them. I think the important thing is the ratio of mitragynine to 7-OH. If we talk about 1%, that's 100 to 1 ratio. I think a regulatory framework is more about the ratio, because you can't create a high 7-OH product without having tons of mitragynine in it. So I think it's a ratio, fixed ratio, that's going to be important to regulate, as opposed to the full amounts of mitragynine or 7-OH, because the concentration, and in natural form, as Max said, you know, you're talking 1%, 2%, that's 1 to 100, 2 to 100 kind of thing. So it's that ratio that will make the difference.
Can I do one last thing too? This is why we need FDA in the game, because even with natural products, FDA can set performance standards. Everybody here, I think, is supporting FDA regulation, but it's complicated, but they can do it.
And so the important factor here is, as we have evaluated what the safety profile of kratom, it is well documented that the natural kratom leaf product has a safety profile that allows for its being sold as, under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, as a botanical supplement. And there are regulations. Now, we also advocate for, in our Kratom Consumer Protection Acts, a regulation on the amount of, or the way the products are extracted. Natural kratom leaf products can be extracted using high-grade solvents, chemical solvents that make a dangerous product. And so our recommendation is you cannot have any extraction methodology used other than FDA-approved food-grade solvents, which limits the ability to concentrate and increase the potency of a natural kratom leaf product. Regulation's important, but in order to get to that level for a dangerous extract product, you have to use chemical manipulation, but 7-OH is all chemical, all of it. There's no natural component other than they take the leaves and they shock it with this catalyst. So that's why we're here today, to educate, promote, advocate for the actual legislation that will relieve the DEA from having to play whack-a-mole going forward. One product after another. We'll get the questions in a minute. One product after another. So that's the goal. Now, everyone has a box of dots, right? Some of you have a box of dots, and we recommend that you only consume what's on the back of it. If you do not follow the directions on the box of dots, you may experience what's called the dumping syndrome, which the Mayo Clinic diagnoses as if you consume this whole entire box of dots, you're likely to experience dizziness, you're likely to vomit, you're likely to pass out, you have an experience. There were 5 children in the state of Georgia, middle school kids, who were taken to the hospital, and the emergency room doctors evaluated those 5 children. And when they concluded their evaluation and reported back to the school district, they said that this was absolutely kratom that had caused the problem for these 5 children. And so I asked the Walker County Sheriff, who had opened a criminal investigation as to how these children had obtained kratom when it was illegal in the state of Georgia to sell to minors kratom. And he agreed to send the substance that was consumed by these children to the University of Florida lab for testing. They tested for 117 substances and found nothing. What they were was a box of dots, consumed too fast by children who were subject to dumping syndrome. But what it illustrates is this hysteria about kratom. These emergency room doctors or medical professionals who put their reputations on the line reporting in the midst of a criminal investigation to the Walker County Sheriff and the school district, this was kratom. It was not. That's the hysteria that has captured too many people in this country. And so in that respect, it is critically important that we have medical professionals that identify accurately what we're dealing with. I'm going to show you one other illustration. This is I want it to be a 20-ounce bottle. We found one with a mark on it. This is milk. I'm going to take 1 ounce of milk in this bottle, and I'm going to make a concoction, by the way. Okay? This is 151 proof grain alcohol, okay? And I'm going to take 19 ounces of this and make a concoction for you. I'm going to ask someone to drink this. I got it. I'm not really going to ask someone to drink this. This particular concoction that I just made, 1 ounce milk and 19 ounces of 151 proof grain alcohol, if you were to consume this, you would likely have a seizure. It would likely kill you. Okay? Would you call this a milk death? It's not a milk death. That's what's happening in America today because of this hysteria about kratom. When you hear reports about deaths that are associated with kratom, and you hear grieving parents talk about kratom killed my child, we ought to be seeking the truth. And the truth is found in good analysis of the actual substances that were consumed, looking at the autopsy and the toxicology reports. And so we've invited Dr. Heidi Sikora to look at some of the deaths that get a lot of attention that you likely will hear about. Some of those families are very public in saying kratom only killed my child. And we're going to ask Heidi to come up and talk about the reality of the autopsy reports in the United States. And Heidi, speak into the microphone. Don't dance like Jack.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I would love to have the clicker because I like to be in control.
It's right there.
It's right in front of me. Okay, fantastic. So, boy, I know that everybody's probably getting hungry, and so am I, so I will try to be brief but thorough. And so I have personally reviewed the forensic records in multiple reported kratom-associated deaths. In each case, the evidence did not support kratom as the cause of death. I am here to explain what the record actually shows and why accurate conclusions matter deeply to the families left behind. As a retired nurse practitioner and prescriber who has spent significant time helping families process the loss of a loved one, I know that what a family is told at the worst possible moment of their life really stays with them forever. When the information is wrong, it can trap them in unresolved grief, preventing them from any path towards peace. I care about all of these families, as well as those who have found relief from kratom. The truth is important to all of these families. Evaluating mortality cases really draws on my ICU experience, where survival depends on a few essential functions. The heart must beat, the lungs must exchange air, blood must deliver oxygen, and the brain must maintain autonomic control. When any of these fail, life ends quickly. That's why identifying the mechanism of death is so important to toxicology. A substance capable of causing death alone must have a clear, reproducible pathway that disrupts one of those systems. With natural kratom, no such pathway has ever been demonstrated. Decades of pharmacology and toxicology studies have repeatedly failed to show respiratory depression, cardiac conduction blockade, autonomic failure, or seizures. As we review these cases, keep in mind one question: which essential system failed, and what substances are actually capable of producing that failure? Okay, so, 3 key questions that I really ask is, how did this person die? And we know that the FDA acknowledges that kratom-associated deaths are extremely rare. And natural kratom leaf has a pharmacological ceiling, and it does not, as Dr. Henningfield talked about, it does not lead to respiratory failure. And could kratom actually cause that? So there has not been a lethal dose identified for kratom. As Dr. Henningfield mentioned, they haven't been able to give an animal enough kratom to actually kill it. And as well, we have the single ascending dose study that did demonstrate tolerability at very high level. And then what product did they actually take? And this is the problem that we have, and with the spike in reported adverse events to poison control, is that all these products are being conflated. So we're not talking just about natural kratom. What's being reported is all these other products, including 7-OH products, pseudoindoxil, et cetera. So the natural kratom leaf is being very much conflated with these other substances. So I'm going to go through these cases that have been used as justification for bans. And so the first one I'd like to talk about is very recent, called Matthew Davenport's Law. This is in Tennessee. So the way that this was reported in the news media was Matthew Davenport's Law bans kratom. And another headline, his life tragically ended at age 27 in 2024 following the ingestion of kratom and Adderall. Is that right? Oh, and doctor-prescribed medications. Yeah, my age is showing too. I don't know if it's possible to get the little laptop up here. I could probably see that a lot better. Okay, can't do that. So I'll do my best. So anyway, but what the record actually shows is the cause of death was diphenhydramine, which is also Benadryl, metragenine, duloxetine, and buspirone intoxication. So although this was reported in the media as just a kratom and prescribed medication death, there was much more to this story. The Benadryl level was actually at 3,000 nanograms per milligram, which is really at a very high toxic level. And then metragenine was at 810 nanograms per milliliter. So the discrepancy here is the media coverage named kratom as the cause, but the official record actually lists 4 substances. And of course, that Benadryl level was extremely high. In addition, the duloxetine and buspirone carry a major warning for serotonin syndrome. Oh, I love that. Oh,
I'm always good.
thank you so much. That's
Except
gonna,
when my wife says it, I'm not.
yeah, because I don't want to be squinting. Okay, so I guess I can still use this? Okay, good. They're working together now. Oh. No, they are. See? Right? Okay, well, anyway, we have a lot of detail here, and I'm not going to go through the detail, but just know that if you're interested in it, I'm more than happy to provide the slides, and we can talk about it afterwards as well. This one works. Okay. Oh, I see. I got to do it. I have to do both. So we'll see how coordinated I am. All right. So the next case is Christopher Hollowak, called CJ's Law. Now, this did not pass into law, but this case was used for justification for a ban. And so the way that this was reported is New Jersey lawmakers advanced bill to ban kratom after the death of a Monmouth County man. And then CJ died from a cardiac arrest after taking a mixture of kratom and Adderall while awaiting arm surgery. But what the official record actually showed is that this was mixed drug intoxication, including metragenine, and a contributory hypertensive cardiovascular disease. There were actually 6 substances that were confirmed: metragenine, amphetamine, bupropion, diphenhydramine again, fentanyl, presumptive but unconfirmed, and in addition, he had an enlarged heart. Metragenine was at 1,000 nanograms per milliliter. There is a reference range by the NMS labs at 1,590 nanograms, but that's really disputed because it's derived from just 3 contested cases. So the discrepancy in this one is the coverage focused on the kratom and Adderall, but obviously the record shows so much more than that. And again, the detail, and I think the posters, if you want to take a look at those, will explain some of the details on these. The third case is from Idaho. This is Kylie Rustici. The coroner actually stated metragenine was the only substance found in Kylie's system. Another headline, the Bonneville County Coroner's investigation revealed that metragenine was the only substance found in Kylie's system. But what the official record actually showed is acute metragenine intoxication, manner to be determined. The substances at the scene that were not tested were trazodone, that's a sedating medication, cyclobenzaprine, methylcarbamol, and they were just omitted from the panel. I certainly would have been interested in seeing what that trazodone level was. The sertraline was another medication that they did test that she was taking. And so the discrepancy here is the news coverage adopted the coroner's framing of so-called kratom death. The record actually shows 3 CNS depressants were found at the scene. And the sertraline actually exceeded the therapeutic range. And of course, the manner of death remained officially undetermined. What I thought was notable is the coroner actually stated to the family that kratom should be removed from the stores, and that was before the investigation was complete. Okay, the next case is Robert Wyatt Wheeler from Texas, 2022. And the way this was reported is that her son took kratom for 6 weeks, it killed him. And then Wyatt Wheeler died of a kratom overdose after taking kratom. But what the official cause of death states is that combined toxic effects of metragenine, diloxamine, hydroxyzine, and sertraline. Interesting, they did not list the dextromethorphan. So the critical gap here is that there was no quantitative value for the metragenine or 7-OH, and 7-OH is listed as positive, but you know they didn't list a level. Also, the dextromethorphan was high, and with the sertraline, that's a high risk for serotonin syndrome. So the discrepancy here, the coverage described a single substance kratom overdose, but the official record actually lists 4 substances, and then they did not have a quantitative level. And the dextromethorphan and the sertraline were also very concerning. Okay, so, yes. Well, you know, I guess as a clinician, I never want to say never. Right. I have not personally seen a case that I've reviewed that is a kratom, kratom only, and having it be present obviously is not causation. Right, absolutely. Yeah, so, well, I think, let me finish this and then we'll have time for questions. So, okay. Um, so, so Austin Gibbs. So the way, and this is from actually the father's report. The toxicology showed metragedine only, no fentanyl, no illicit drugs, no prescription opioids. And he also stated that Austin died alone after consuming a kratom product that he believed was legal and safe. This was not a contaminated product. It was not mixed with alcohol. So what the NMS Labs toxicology showed was metragedine at 3,300 nanograms per milliliter. Now, an average consumer will not have that level of metragedine. So, this is more somebody who's consuming a lot. And he also had the doxalamine, which is also, it's the primary ingredient in Unisom, and then diphenhydramine. Those are not concerning levels. But what is concerning is the critical screening gap, that the actual novel psychoactive screen was not ordered. And this was from Ohio, where in Montgomery County, it's really a documented epicenter of novel opioid activity in Ohio. So, the father did say that it was not a contaminated product, but there was no testing to prove that, so we don't know for sure. Okay, this is the last case. So Dakota Herrera in Michigan. So, and again, this is being used as a justification to ban something that, does help a lot of people. So Oakland County medical examiner confirmed Herrera's death was caused by metragedine intoxication. But the official cause of death, metragedine intoxication, manner undeterminable. Metragedine level was at 290 nanograms. My guess is that there's probably quite a few people in this room that might have that level. It's kind of a typical, level for a daily consumer. And but importantly, 7-OH was not tested. So there is no pharmacological mechanism provided for how 290 nanograms cause death. And again, we don't have a lethal level of metragedine or, that can cause death. There were no other substances beside cannabis detected. So I think that this one, the 7-OH, was not tested. And I think that's really key because, you just don't know if that was a pure kratom natural leaf product or if it was 7-OH. Okay, so there's a pattern that I've seen across these cases and others as well. First of all, incomplete toxicology. So in 4 of the 6 cases, testing was not ordered for substances present at the scene or for collected specimens. And sometimes they'll do that for cost containment, but I got it? Okay, thank you. He's always watching out for me. I appreciate it. So, so a panel limited to the selective substances cannot support sole substance attribution. There's also other substances capable of causing death. So in 5 of 6 cases, at least one other confirmed CNS active substance was present at a clinically significant concentration. In the remaining case, 7-OH was not tested. There's investigative gaps in all of them. you know, the prescription drug monitoring program, a query can be done to see if somebody is prescribed something else or if they are taking something else, and those are not being done. Medical histories are unverified in multiple cases. So confirmatory testing was not performed for presumptive positive fentanyl. Metragenine below or without the fatal threshold. So 4 of 6 cases, metragenine was below the lower bound of the only published reference range. And in one case, no quantity was given at all. Drug interactions are often not addressed in these cause of death reports. So in 5 cases, multiple CNS active substances, clinically documented interactions, including serotonin syndrome, additive CNS depression, and cardiac effects were absent from the official determination. In 2 of the sound policy requires sound science, legislation that criminalizes the natural botanical used safely by an estimated 15 to 20 million Americans should be grounded in cases that meet the evidentiary standard. Sound science distinguishes natural kratom leaf from synthetic derivatives such as 7-OH, pseudoindoxyl, etc. Any regulatory framework that reflects that distinction supported by GMP standards, accurate labeling, and age restrictions, the evidence in this review does not support prohibition of natural kratom products. The families in these cases deserve honest answers about what happened. Misattribution does not honor their grief. It redirects it toward a policy outcome that the evidence just does not support. And I think that's all I have. Thank you. You take it?
So thank you, everyone. We've gone a little longer than we anticipated, so if you have any questions, you can submit them in writing to the American Kratom Association, and we'll be glad to get back to you. We'll farm them out to the appropriate expert so that you have the right answer to your questions. At the end of the day, our appeal is to make sure that you take that bright line test and protect natural leaf kratom access as has been documented by the safety data provided both by NIH and by the FDA. And you look at the 8-factor analyses, which documents and validates the 7-OH contents that should be scheduled, and all of their derivatives. And the appeal to the Congress is to do not impose upon the DEA the whack-a-mole because it's too slow. We need to have good, solid legislation that limits the content of products that pose a threat to the American people, and that's why we're here today. Natural kratom leaf is saving lives. And that's going to be documented in the study that will be conducted by NIH, because we've already seen the anecdotal evidence demonstrating people are using kratom effectively in order to wean off of opioid addictions. And we can save lives by allowing that to be the case. And 7-OH is an opioid. It is exactly that. And people that are consuming it are being put at risk. And that door needs to be shut firmly and conclusively by both the DEA and the Congress. So thanks, everyone. We have lunch available.
I've got about 20 copies of the introduction of a book on kratom by some of the world's leading experts, but the summary chapter up front summarizes a lot of what we already covered. So if you feel free, I'll just leave it on the table.
Excellent. So they're welcome to come up and get those. Enjoy lunch. Stephanie, is there anything we need to talk about lunch in terms of logistics? It's back there. So welcome everyone to enjoy lunch, and we appreciate your being here today. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody. Thanks for coming.